Hello, I'm Rowan Ambrose and today I'm going to be showing you how to repot a cheap supermarket herb into a bigger pot so it's got more room to stretch and to develop new growth. I'm a writer and a gardener and I'm here to encourage you to make the most of your tiny garden space. So if you're enjoying these videos, it'd be great if you could like and consider subscribing to my channel. So now I'm going to talk you through the things you need before you start potting up your plant. So obviously you need a herb to start with. You can buy these at most supermarkets or garden centres, little DIY shops. This is a sage which I bought at the end of last year, and you can just see it's got little green growth coming through. It's been quite dormant during the winter, not been doing much, but now it's just starting to put on some growth. And it needs a bit more room than this pot. So the next thing you need is a pot a little bit bigger than the one that it's coming out of. It needs to have a drainage hole as well. So if you're buying a plastic pot that doesn't have holes in the bottom, it's really important to use a screwdriver or a pencil, really anything, a biro, to just punch a couple of holes in the bottom, because otherwise your plant will get waterlogged, and then if the roots get waterlogged then the plant dies. Then you need a planting mixture. So this is some compost, just ordinary multi-purpose compost you can buy in any garden centre or any DIY shop, and some gravel or stones or horticultural grit. That just helps improve the drainage, which particularly for herbs is so important for their development. So the first thing to do, I'm using gloves because this compost is very wet, but you don't need to, it's just personal choice, like so many things with gardening. So before you start, it's really important to give your plant a good water, and then that's gives it a good head start when it comes to helping the roots find their way in the new compost. This one was quite an easy one to tap out, but you just need to treat it a bit like a jelly mould. If it's a plastic pot, you can give it a bit of a squeeze there and just ease it out like that. Keep the pot, even if it's not a fancy one, they're always useful. The next thing you need to do is to tease out some of the roots here. You can see that this sage plant has grown around the edges of the pot, so it's just going around in a spiral, and what you need to do is to disrupt that root system so that the roots will actually seek out the new compost. This feels brutal. I will never get used to doing this because it feels like you're murdering it, but in actual fact, if you don't do this, then the plant doesn't do as well. So after years of working this out for myself, I've realised that it's kind of tough love. You do need to, it feels quite destructive, but it does benefit the plant in the long run. So now you can see I've just sort of teased out the roots there, and that will make it much easier for those roots to benefit from the fresh new compost. So if you just pop that down for a moment, and then you can start filling your pot. If you put a few stones at the bottom, or if you've got any broken terracotta pots, they're quite good just to block up that hole, just a handful, and then you can start filling with compost. And if you go gradually at first, this isn't a huge pot, so I don't need to put loads in at the beginning, and then if you get your plant and you just work out if it's got enough compost in there. No, I think this one needs a little bit more. Just one more handful, like that. If there are any big lumps in the compost, if you try and break them down a bit, it's just making things as easy as possible for the tiny roots to spread out. And then test again, that feels more like it. And then what you do now is you just go round the edges of the pot systematically, feeding in little clumps of compost and then poking it down, and you just keep going round. It can be a bit messy, so if you've got space outside, then it's really good to do these sorts of jobs outside, but if you're doing it in the kitchen, just be aware that you will end up dropping bits over the floor. I've never known anybody, however much practice they've had, to do this tidily. So just popping it around the outside, turning it around a bit, easing it on the edges. It is better for a plant to have a pot just one size up from this. It might feel like it's creating more work for you, but if you pot a little plant into a huge container, it doesn't actually do the plant any good at all. It might well struggle. So if you can pot up just to one size up, it is better for the plant. If you can't, if you don't have the time or the energy, then don't worry about it too much. You know, you do what works for you. It's there are plenty of shortcuts in gardening, and it's all about working out what works for you, because plants are robust things and they want to grow, they want to find a way. So now I've just been tucking in all the way around, just easing it down until there's contact between all of the compost and the roots. Roots don't like being waterlogged, and they also don't like pockets of air, so it is important to keep tucking until you can feel that there's a good compactness there. And that feels like it's almost done. This little sage is going to have a bit more space to stretch out, and then you can use sage in loads and loads of cooking recipes. It does give a good lift to loads of savoury dishes, so it's a very handy herb to have around. And then when you're done, I use a few stones on the top. This helps water not to spray everywhere when you're using a watering can. Sometimes you end up, unless your watering can's got a fine rose on it, you can end up almost pushing the compost out if the water's too strong. So having a few little stones on top can really help disperse it. Oh, I can smell that sage now, it's amazing. So there we are, there's your repotted sage. The only thing it needs now is a good watering to make sure that will get rid of any little air pockets. Help tidy up the mess of the compost. Good soaking. This is a good tip as well when you're watering any potted plants, is to water until you can see it running out at the bottom, because it's much better for plants to have a good soaking once in a while than to have a tiny little scattering every day or so, because that way their roots will come up to the surface and they get scorched when you next go into a warm sunny spell, or you're too busy to water them. So I hope you found this useful. Play around with herbs, get some good reductions from the supermarket. They're at £1 maybe for a parsley or a mint. They're really good herbs to play around with, and if you end up with loads of them, you can always give them away to friends. It's a lovely thing to do. So good luck repotting your plants. Bye for now.